it was all because we saw an agenda item for our Board of Selectmen, and they were going to vote on whether or not to approve Wyndham's participation in the program. But it didn't say the Granite State Future. I think it said something related to sustainable communities or sustainable development. And so at that point, when we saw it on a Friday or a Thursday, and they were going to vote on a Monday, I was concerned. And I called up the chairman of our Board of Selectmen, and I asked him, what the vote was about. And I asked him if there was any information that we could see. And he sent me a copy of the information that he had, and that referenced the Granite State Future Program. Now, this is what they were given. It's a 12-page document, and he told me that, it's the kind of thing where they'd looked at it and they would, if nobody had any comments on it, it's the kind of thing that they'd look at it for about 2 minutes and sign it and move on. So I read it, and Eileen as well, and we were concerned about quite a few things in here. As we went through this, it references that the Nashua Regional Planning Commission is the lead point of contact with HUD, and on behalf of the program, and will assume administrative responsibilities to ensure that the program is carried out in compliance with HUD requirements, and holds fiscal responsibility for the program. So when I read that, my radar went up, because it says here that it will be carried out in compliance with HUD requirements. It never mentions what those requirements are. All it talks about is some committees that they're going to have, talks about some of the partners in the program, makes it sound very innocuous. And in fact, when we went to that meeting on Monday night, the representative from the Planning Commission came in. He insisted, very calm, very laid back, very unassuming, very folksy, that this is a bottom-up program. This is the type of thing they've been doing for years. It's advisory only. The Regional Planning Commission can, they're only there to help. HUD was only brought up, I believe, only after somebody brought up the fact that this was a HUD program. Oh yes, but they only provide seed money. They're really not involved with this. And he went on to explain that the Granite State Future Program is comprised, it's a consortium with 9 regional planning commissions throughout the state. This is the implementation of that program. And he spoke about the Sustainable Communities Initiative. Now, I find it very interesting that this partnership agreement, the Granite State Future, which is the umbrella program for the Sustainable Communities Initiative in the state of New Hampshire, does not reference by name the Sustainable Communities Initiative. It only references it by terms like this program will be carried out in compliance with HUD requirements. So the first night, like I said, we only had a couple of days to get up to speed, and this was all that we had to begin with. So Eileen and I went through this, and she's going to have a whole different slant on this, a whole nother perspective. We went through this, and we saw that there were plans for each of the 9 regions, that the plans must consist of the following elements: a comprehensive needs assessment, a vision statement, goals and priorities, a housing plan, and analysis of impediments to fair housing. Analysis of impediments. There's words and terms in here, unless you research them, you do not know what they mean. And when I first read this, I had no clue, and I will come back to this. Do you have a time limit for me?
No.
Okay, I can probably go about 20 or 25 minutes. I promise it'll go quick, but it will be very enlightening. Is that too long?
No.
Okay, thank
Go
you.
right ahead.
Regional transportation, water infrastructure plan, environmental plan, economic development plan, comprehensive climate change impact, implementation plan, scenario planning, including metrics and performance monitoring to track plan implementation. So during the presentation that our planning commissioner came in and gave, he said that there were no mandates, that it was all voluntary. Wyndham can do as little or as much as they wanted. But as we read through some of these things, we started to get the sense that that really wasn't the case. And one of these things is scenario planning, including metrics and performance monitoring. We learned more about that once we obtained legally binding agreements. Legally binding, those are HUD's terms, from the contract that was signed by the Nashua Regional Planning Commission on behalf of all 9 regional planning commissions in the state. And I'll get to that in a little bit. Going through this document, some concerns were raised because if this is a planning agreement, and they're calling it a land use and resource planning management program, I was concerned when I read that there was going to be, amongst the different committees, that there was going to be a regional equity team. And that kind of took me back, and I wondered, well, what is that? Well, it's right here in front of me. It says that is comprised, there will be a regional equity team that is comprised of representatives of underserved and marginalized populations in their region that will ensure the voices of these populations are reflected in the regional plan. So I asked our representative from the Regional Planning Commission who are the underserved and marginalized populations. And this is all on videotape. So I encourage you, if you have any doubts, email me and I will send you to those videotapes. And so those are the people who really, they don't really have representation in our government. They get up at 5 or 6 in the morning, they travel to Boston, they don't get home until 9 or 10 at night. They don't have a voice in your community. They don't get a chance to vote. They need to be represented. We want to make sure that this is inclusive and that everybody has a voice. So I was surprised that I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, that when Eileen and I, we got the legally binding agreements a week later, that in those documents, they actually have a definition of underserved populations. And it's not people who get up at 6 in the morning and go to Boston and work and come home because they don't have a chance to vote. The underserved populations says the term underserved populations means groups of individuals who fall within one or more of the categories protected under the Fair Housing Act and who are A, of immigrant population, especially racial and ethnic minorities who are non-English speaking or have limited English proficiency. B, in rural populations. C, homeless. D, persons with disabilities, for example, physical or mental. E, persons in areas that are heavily populated with minorities where there is inadequate protection or ability to provide service from the state or local government or private fair housing organizations. Or populations that have faced generational economic disadvantage, job dislocation, or other forces that prevent them from achieving individual and family self-sufficiency. So when I read that, a couple things crossed through my mind. One is I was lied to by this member of the Regional Planning Commission because what I just read to you are not people who don't have a chance to vote because they are working too much. And two, I asked myself, where am I represented? How about my neighbors? People in my town? How about the people in my state? This definition, this description of underserved populations does not represent the majority of the population, the vast majority of the population in our state. And these are the people who are going to have an emphasis on the planning of the process of the planning that will be produced in the regional equity plans for each regional planning commission. And when I asked Mr. Simmons, who is our representative, why will they have an emphasis, his response to me was that, oh no, they won't. We have that on tape too. And in these legally binding documents, it says that there, yes, indeed, there will be an emphasis on the under-marginalized and underrepresented populations. Am I talking loud enough? Okay. So I don't want to take up too much time with this Granite State Future document. There were some things in here that we had concerns about. Talks about any disputes regarding administration or the grant resources are resolved by the executive committee. So it's important to understand that the 9 regional planning commissions are comprised of unelected representatives, okay? So it's a layer of bureaucracy. It's a regional committee. And from each of those 9 regional committees, they form an executive committee that is now 2 levels of bureaucracy away from our direct representation, where we don't have a voice to them. They are not directly accountable to us. This is not what our founding fathers envisioned for our form of government. So after talking to our selectmen and bringing up some issues from several different perspectives, our town decided that they needed to do some more investigation because they weren't given all the information that they felt that they should have been, and our town attorney definitely did not have an opportunity to review any of the documentation. So I went off and we said, we were talking, and I was concerned about this reference to HUD requirements of the HUD program. So I said, well, Nashua is the lead point of contact. They signed the contract with HUD. They must have. So we went to the Nashua Regional Planning Commission and we asked for the contract. First we asked for the application, because we knew the application would have information in it as to why they were deserving of being awarded the grant, and it was a competitive grant. And when we did that, we asked for the grant application and all associated documents. We were given the grant application. We asked if we could look it over in the office. We took about 10 or 15 minutes, we looked it over, and it referenced the narrative, which could be no more than 25 pages long. And the narrative separates out each of the different applicants for the grant. And so we went back, we said, there's a narrative, can we get a copy of that? They said, oh yes, of course. So they printed that up, and as we looked that over, that's when it occurred to me that there's got to be a contract as well, because they were awarded the grant a couple months earlier. And I asked for the legally binding contract as well as all associated documents. And what I was given was a copy of, what do I do with that? Flip it over. This is what I was given. I was given a 4-page document. It's a HUD 1044. And on it, all these markings are mine, by the way. You know, when I hold up documents, if something's highlighted or there's an arrow or something, I've done that. And I'm willing to share this with anybody who's interested in it. I've posted a lot of things on the Southern New Hampshire 912 website. It's southernnh912.com. So this document, which they gave to me, and Eileen and I looked over, we didn't have to look at it far to see that down here, there's 8 items, and in those 8 items, 11 other documents are referenced. And if you read right above that section, it says this instrument, the HUD 1044, and HUD 1044 continuation sheet, sets forth a legally binding agreement between the parties to all amounts, deliverables, tasks, period of performance, terms and conditions, blah, blah, blah. So I said, okay, so now there's a legally binding agreement. Before, it was all voluntary. There was nothing really obligatory by the parties. And I was really surprised when I came to page 3.
GrokTV.